The massive space station Kepler hung in the darkness like a glowing city. It orbited around a giant gas planet that swirled with colors of blue and purple. The station was huge, bigger than most cities back on Earth. Millions of beings from across the galaxy lived and worked there. It was neutral ground, a place where no single species could claim control. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the busy corridors of the station. His boots made soft sounds on the metal floor as he moved past aliens of all shapes and sizes. Some walked on two legs like humans, others floated in the air, and a few crawled along the walls with dozens of tiny legs. Jake had been coming to Kepler Station for 3 years now, but he still found the variety of alien life amazing. Behind him walked his crew from the merchant ship Liberty's Edge. Lisa Walsh was his engineer, a woman in her 30s with grease stains on her hands and a tool belt around her waist. She looked at everything with curious eyes, always wondering how alien technology worked. Pete Collins was the navigator, a quiet man who knew every trade route in this part of the galaxy. Amy Rodriguez brought up the rear as their security chief. She was smaller than the others, but her eyes never stopped moving, always watching for trouble. The group made their way to the Cosmic Drift Cantina. It was one of the most popular bars on the station, located in the entertainment district. The Thing Cantina was built inside a large dome with clear walls that showed the stars outside. Tables and chairs of different sizes filled the space to accommodate the many types of alien bodies that might sit in them. Jake pushed through the entrance doors and immediately felt the familiar buzz of activity. The air was thick with different smells from alien foods and drinks. Conversations in dozens of languages mixed together into a constant hum of noise. Holographic displays showed news from across the galaxy, while soft music played in the background. Bartender was a being called a Nexian, with 4 arms and skin that changed colors based on his mood. Right now his skin showed calm blue patterns as he mixed drinks for customers. He nodded at Jake when he saw the human captain approach the bar. "The usual table, Captain Morrison?" the bartender asked in accented but clear English. "Thanks, Zeph," Jake replied, leading his crew to a table near the bar, but with a good view of the whole cantina. The humans had been regular customers here. For over a year, they were polite, paid their bills, and never caused trouble. Most of the other customers had grown used to seeing them around. Humans were still new to galactic society, having made first contact only 15 years ago. Many aliens still saw them as primitive compared to species that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. Lisa ordered a drink that sparkled with tiny lights inside the liquid. Pete got something that looked like water but tasted like fruit. Amy chose a simple beer-like drink that most species could enjoy. Jake asked for coffee, one of the few Earth drinks that the cantina stacked specially for human customers. As they sat and talked about cargo prices and trade routes, Jake noticed the atmosphere in the cantina beginning to change. Conversations became quieter, and many aliens kept looking toward the entrance. The bartender's skin shifted from blue to worried yellow patterns. The reason became clear when a group of Zarthak soldiers entered the cantina. The Zarthak were tall reptilian beings, standing over 7 feet high with thick scales covering their bodies. They had long tails and sharp claws on their hands and feet. Their culture was built around military strength and honor in battle. The lead Zarthak wore the uniform of a commander, with metal plates covering his chest and arms. "Commander Vextar," Pete whispered to his crewmates. "I've heard of him. He's been fighting border wars for the hegemony for 20 years. The Zarthak commander moved through the cantina like he owned it. His soldiers followed behind him, their hands resting on the plasma weapons at their sides. Other customers moved out of their way without being asked. The commander chose a large table near the center of the room and sat down heavily. His yellow eyes scanned the cantina as if looking for enemies. Jake sipped his coffee and watched the scene unfold. He had learned to read the politics of the galaxy during his years as a trader. The Zarthak hegemony was one of the major powers in this region of space. They controlled dozens of star systems and had one of the strongest military forces in the galaxy. The tension in the room increased even more when another group entered the cantina. These beings looked completely different from the reptilian Zarthak. The ethereals appeared to be made of pure energy, glowing with soft light that shifted between different colors. They had roughly humanoid shapes but seemed to float rather than walk. Their leader was taller than the others and glowed brighter with golden light. "High Ethereal Nixfan," Amy said quietly. "This could get interesting." The Ethereal Collective was the other major power in this part of the galaxy. They claimed to be highly evolved beings who had moved beyond physical bodies to become pure energy and thought. They looked down on most other species as primitive and inferior. The Cold War between the Ethereals and the Zarthak had been going on for decades. High Ethereal Nixfan and her followers took a table on the opposite side of the cantina from the Zarthak. The space between the two groups seemed to crackle with tension. Other customers began finishing their drinks quickly and leaving. Nobody wanted to be caught in the middle if trouble started. Jake noticed that his crew was one of the few groups that stayed in their seats. Most aliens saw humans as weak and harmless, not worth worrying about when real powers like the Ethereals and Zarthak were present. This suited Jake just fine. Being underestimated had its advantages. "Should we leave?" Lisa asked, glancing between the two alien factions. "Not yet," Jake replied. "Let's see what happens." The bartender's skin was now showing nervous purple and red patterns. He continued serving drinks but moved more carefully, trying not to draw attention to himself. The few remaining customers spoke in whispers, if they spoke at all. Commander Vextar ordered drinks for his soldiers in the harsh, barking language of the Zarthak. High Ethereal Nixfan communicated with her followers without making any sound, using the telepathic abilities that Ethereals were known for. Both groups pretended to ignore each other, but Jake could see they were watching for any sign of weakness or aggression. The human captain had seen situations like this before during his time in Earth's military. Years before, he became a merchant trader. He recognized the signs of a confrontation building. Both sides were looking for an excuse to prove their superiority over their rivals. Jake finished his coffee and signaled the bartender for another round of drinks for his crew. He wanted to observe what happened next. In his experience, the galaxy's politics often came down to these small moments when tensions finally boiled over into action. The other customers who remained in the cantina were mostly species that were too afraid to move or too curious to leave. A few traders from neutral worlds sat quietly at corner tables, hoping to avoid notice. Some younger aliens from peaceful species watched with wide eyes, having never seen members of the major powers face each other directly. As Jake looked around the cantina, he could feel the situation getting more dangerous by the minute. The Zarthak soldiers were getting restless, their claws tapping against the table surface. The Ethereals were glowing brighter, which usually meant they were preparing to use their energy-based abilities. What none of the aliens in the cantina knew was that Jake Morrison and his crew were not just simple human traders. They had been watching and learning about galactic politics for months, gathering information about the major powers and their conflicts. Tonight might be the night when all that preparation would finally prove useful. The first sign of real trouble came from an unexpected source. A small Zarthak merchant at a corner table was arguing with an ethereal trader over a cargo contract. Their voices grew louder as other customers tried to ignore them. Jake Morrison watched the scene unfold while sipping his second cup of coffee. The Zarthak merchant was much smaller than the soldiers, but his scales were bright green with anger. He slammed his clawed hand on the table and pointed at the ethereal trader. "You changed the numbers after we agreed on the price," he hissed in broken common language. I saw you do it with your mind tricks. The ethereal trader's glow shifted to a cold blue color. When ethereals were annoyed, their light always changed this way. Your primitive brain cannot understand the complexity of interstellar commerce. The being replied in a voice that sounded like music, but carried an insulting tone. Perhaps you should stick to selling simple things to simple minds. Lisa Walsh raised her eyebrows at the insult. That's not going to end well, she whispered to her crewmates. The Zarthak merchant stood up quickly, knocking over his chair. His tail lashed back and forth in anger. Nobody calls me primitive, he growled. My family has been trading for 5 generations. 5 generations is nothing, the ethereal replied, now glowing brighter with arrogance. My people were exploring the galaxy when your ancestors were still learning to make fire. Commander Vextar's head turned toward the argument. His yellow eyes focused on the ethereal trader with the look of a predator seeing prey. The other Zarthak soldiers stopped their own conversations and watched their commander for orders. At the same time, High Ethereal Nixfon's attention was drawn to the dispute. Her golden glow dimmed as she observed the situation. The other ethereals in her group began to float closer together, forming a protective circle around their leader. Jake could see the problem developing. What started as a simple business disagreement was about to become something much bigger. The 2 most powerful factions in this part of the galaxy were about to use a minor trade dispute as an excuse for a major confrontation. The Zarthak merchant reached for the plasma pistol on his belt. Say that again about my ancestors, he demanded. The ethereal trader's form began to glow with dangerous energy. Gladly. Your entire species is a collection of violent animals who learn to use tools but never learn to think. That was the breaking point. Commander Vextar stood up so quickly that his chair fell backward with a loud crash. His massive frame cast a shadow across half the cantina. What did you say about my people? He roared in the Zarthak language. All 6 of his soldiers jumped to their feet at the same time. Their hands moved to their weapons in perfect military coordination. The sound of plasma pistols being charged filled the air with a high-pitched whine. High Ethereal Nixfon rose higher into the air, her golden light now blazing like a small sun. Commander Vextar, she said in a voice that echoed strangely, control your subordinates before they embarrass themselves further. The insult was clear, even to those who did not understand ethereal culture. Calling a Zarthak military commander unable to control his troops was one of the worst things anyone could say. Vextar's scales darkened to almost black with rage. You energy ghosts think you are better than everyone else, he snarled. But you bleed just like the rest of us. We do not bleed, Nixfon replied coldly. We are beyond such primitive physical limitations. The remaining customers in the cantina began to panic. A group of small, furry aliens called Felixians ran for the exit, chittering in fear. 2 tall, thin beings from the spiral arm worlds tried to hide behind an overturned table. The bartender's skin was now flashing bright red warning colors as he ducked behind the bar. Jake Morrison remained calm in his seat, but his crew was getting nervous. Pete Collins kept looking toward the exit, calculating the fastest route out of the cantina. Amy Rodriguez's hand moved slowly toward the weapon on her hip, but she kept it hidden under the table. Jake, Lisa whispered urgently, maybe we should leave now. Jake shook his head slightly. Not yet. I want to see how this plays out. Commander. Vextar took a step toward the ethereal leader. His soldiers spread out in a classic military formation, surrounding the area but leaving their commander room to move. Each soldier carried a plasma rifle capable of punching holes through steel walls. High Ethereal Nixfon's followers responded by forming their own defensive pattern. They created a circle of floating, glowing beings with their leader at the center. Energy began to build between their hands, crackling with power that could fry electronic systems or burn through armor. The tension in the cantina was now so thick it felt hard to breathe. Even the background music had stopped playing. The only sounds were the hum of charged weapons and the nervous breathing of the few customers who had not fled. "Your soldiers point weapons at us," Nixfan observed, her musical voice now carrying an edge of threat. "This is unwise." "Your people are gathering energy for an attack," Vextar replied, his claws extending from his fingers. "This is also unwise." Both leaders were now committed to the confrontation. Neither could back down without losing face in front of their followers and the watching galaxy. The Cold War between their species had been building toward this moment. For decades, the Zarthak merchant who started the whole argument was now pressed against the wall, forgotten by everyone else. The ethereal trader had moved closer to the other members of his species, seeking protection in the group. Jake noticed something that the aliens had missed. The cantina's security cameras were still recording everything. Word of this confrontation would spread across the galaxy within hours. Whatever happened next would have consequences far beyond this single bar fight. "Last chance," Commander Vextar growled. "Tell your traitor to apologize for insulting my people." "Zarthak do not deserve apologies," High Ethereal Nixfan replied. "They deserve education, but they are too primitive to learn." The final insult was too much. One of the younger Zarthak soldiers, a warrior named Kreshta, could not contain his anger any longer. He raised his plasma rifle and aimed it at the nearest ethereal. "Stand down, soldier," Vextar barked, but it was too late. Kreshta's finger moved toward the trigger. At the same moment, an ethereal named Valther misread the movement and released a bolt of pure energy toward the Zarthak position. The energy bolt struck the wall behind Kreshta, melting a hole through the metal. The young Zarthak soldier fired his plasma rifle in response, sending a bolt of superheated gas toward the ethereal group. Both sides erupted into action at the same time. Plasma bolts and energy beams began flying across the cantina in all directions. Tables were overturned as cover. Drinks spilled across the floor as customers dove for safety. Jake Morrison felt the heat from a plasma bolt as it passed close to his table. The bolt struck the wall behind him, leaving a glowing mark in the metal. Amy Rodriguez was already moving, pulling her captain down behind their overturned table. "Now can we leave?" Lisa shouted over the sound of weapons fired. Jake looked around the cantina as the battle raged. Zarthak soldiers were taking cover behind the bar, while ethereals floated near the ceiling, raining energy bolts down on their enemies. The beautiful dome that showed the stars was now cracked from stray weapons fire, but something was wrong with the whole scene. Both sides were fighting with skill and courage, but they were also being careless. Weapons fire was going everywhere, hitting walls, furniture, and empty space. It was like they were more interested in making noise than actually hitting their targets. Jake realized what was happening. This was not a real battle between military forces. This was a show of strength, a demonstration for the cameras and the watching galaxy. Both sides wanted to look powerful without actually starting a war that could destroy them both. But then a stray plasma bolt nearly hit Amy Rodriguez, burning through her jacket and leaving a smoking hole in the fabric. She looked down at the damage and then up at Jake with a grim expression. "Well," Jake said quietly, "now they've made it our problem." Jake Morrison stood up slowly from behind the overturned table. Around him, the cantina looked like a war zone. Plasma burns marked the walls, and smoke filled the air. The Zarthak soldiers were firing from behind the bar, while the ethereals floated near the damaged ceiling, sending down bolts of energy that exploded against the floor. Amy Rodriguez looked at the hole burned through her jacket and frowned. "That was my favorite jacket," she said calmly. Pete Collins crouched beside their table, watching the aliens shoot at each other. "They're not very good at this," he observed. "Look how they're wasting ammunition." Lisa Walsh peeked over the edge of their table. The Zarthak are bunched up too close together. One good energy blast could hit 3 of them at once. Jake nodded, studying the battle with the eyes of someone who had seen real combat. During his years in Earth's military, he had learned to read battlefields quickly. What he saw now was not impressive. That the Zarthak soldiers were brave, but predictable. They moved in straight lines and took cover in obvious places. Their plasma rifles were powerful, but they were firing too fast, which made their shots less accurate. Commander Vexstar was shouting orders, but his soldiers were too excited to listen carefully. The ethereals had different problems. They could float in the air, which gave them a good view of the battlefield, but it also made them easy targets. Their energy attacks were precise but took time to charge up. High Ethereal Nixfon was trying to coordinate her followers, but they were used to fighting as individuals rather than as a team. Both sides were making basic mistakes that any human military instructor would have pointed out in the first week of training. Jake looked at his crew and made a decision. Lisa, can you reach the power controls for this section of the station? Lisa followed his gaze to a control panel near the back wall. Between her and the panel were 2 Zarthak soldiers and at least 3 floating ethereals. It won't be easy, but yes. Pete, you know the layout of this station better than anyone. Is there another way into this cantina? Pete thought for a moment while a plasma bolt exploded against the wall above their heads. Service corridor behind the kitchen. Leads to the storage area. Amy, if you had to stop this fight without killing anyone, how would you do it? Amy Rodriguez studied the battlefield with professional interest. Target their equipment, not their bodies. Break their weapons, destroy their cover, force them to move where they don't want to go. Jake smiled. That's what I was thinking. Here's what we're going to do. He gave each of his crew members specific instructions using hand signals he had learned during his military service. The signals were silent and quick, impossible for the aliens to notice or understand. Lisa nodded and began crawling toward the back wall, staying low to avoid the weapons fire. She moved slowly and carefully, using overturned tables and debris as cover. The aliens were too busy fighting each other to notice one small human woman moving through the shadows. Pete disappeared into the kitchen area, looking for the service corridor he had mentioned. His job was to get behind the ethereal position and create a distraction that would break their formation. Amy took her weapon from its holster, but did not aim it at any of the aliens. Instead, she studied the cantina's structure, looking for weak points she could exploit. Jake remained where he was, but he began to move differently. Instead of hiding behind the table, he started shifting position every few seconds. He was not trying to avoid the weapon's fire completely. He was trying to draw attention to himself. The first part of the plan worked when Lisa reached the power controls. The cantina's lighting system was designed to create atmosphere for customers, which meant it had many different settings. Lisa began cycling through the options rapidly. The lights went from normal to bright white, then to flashing red, then to a strobing pattern that hurt the eyes. The ethereals, who were beings of pure energy, were especially affected by the changing light patterns. Their own glow began to flicker in response to the external lighting. High Ethereal Nixfon tried to maintain her position near the ceiling, but the strobing lights were interfering with her energy-based vision. She could no longer see the Zarthak positions clearly. Commander Vextar was also confused by the light changes, but his reptilian eyes were better at adapting to different conditions. He thought the ethereals were somehow controlling the lights as a weapon. "They're trying to blind us," he roared to his soldiers. "Concentrate fire on their positions." The Zarthak began firing more rapidly, but the changing lights made it hard for them to aim accurately. Their plasma bolts went wild, hitting walls, tables, and empty air, while the aliens were distracted by the light show. Pete Collins made his move from the service corridor. He did not attack the ethereals directly. Instead, He activated an emergency protocol that was built into all space stations. Warning sirens began to sound throughout the cantina. Blast doors started to slide shut, dividing the large room into smaller sections. The computer system announced in multiple languages that an emergency had been declared, and all beings should remain calm and follow evacuation procedures. The blast doors were designed to contain fires or hull breaches, but they also worked well for containing fights. 3 Zarthak soldiers found themselves trapped in the bar area, separated from their commander. 2 ethereals were caught in a section near the kitchen, cut off from their leader. Both alien factions began to panic. This was not how battles were supposed to work. Enemies were supposed to face each other directly, not use the station's own systems against them. Amy Rodriguez chose this moment to begin her part of the plan. She did not shoot at the aliens, but she did shoot at their equipment and the things they were using for cover. Her first shot destroyed a plasma rifle that a Zarthak soldier had left on a table while he reloaded. Her second shot hit the support beam that was holding up part of the ceiling where the ethereals were floating. The beam did not break, but it started to vibrate in a way that made it uncomfortable for energy beings to stay near it. Jake Morrison began the most dangerous part of the plan. He stepped out from behind his table and walked calmly toward the center of the cantina. Plasma bolts and energy beams flew around him, but he did not run or take cover. "Stop," he called out in a loud, clear voice. Commander Vextar turned toward the human in surprise. "Get back, small one. This does not concern your species." "It concerns me now," Jake replied, still walking forward. "You damaged my engineer's jacket." High ethereal Nixfon floated down from the ceiling, her golden glow flickering with confusion. "Human, you do not understand the forces at work here. This is a matter between superior species." Jake stopped in the middle of the cantina, equidistant from both alien leaders. Around him, the strobing lights continued, the sirens wailed, and the blast doors made grinding sounds as they sealed off sections of the room. "I understand perfectly," Jake said. "You're both putting on a show for the cameras, trying to look strong without actually starting a real war. But you made one mistake." Both alien commanders stared at him. Their soldiers and followers were too confused by everything that was happening to continue fighting effectively. "What mistake?" Vextar demanded. Jake smiled. "You assumed humans would just watch and do nothing. You thought we were too weak or too stupid to matter." He gestured around the cantina, where his crew had turned a simple battle into complete chaos. "How's that working out for you?" The aliens began to realize that something had gone very wrong with their carefully planned confrontation. The lights, the sirens, the blast doors, the targeted shots at their equipment, none of this was accidental. The humans had somehow taken control of the entire situation. Lisa Walsh emerged from the shadows near the power controls, still holding the device that controlled the cantina systems. Pete Collins appeared from the service corridor, a tablet in his hands showing the station's emergency protocols. Amy Rodriguez stood with her weapon ready, but pointed at the ceiling rather than at any of the aliens. "You see," Jake continued, "we've been watching you 2 species for months. We know how you fight, how you think, what you consider honorable or dishonorable. We know your strengths and your weaknesses." Commander Vextar's yellow eyes narrowed. "Impossible. Humans are primitives. You have no advanced technology, no special powers." "That's true," Jake agreed. "We're not stronger than you or smarter than you, but we have something else." "What?" High ethereal Nixfon asked, her musical voice now carrying a note of uncertainty. Jake looked around the cantina one more time, taking in the scene of controlled chaos his crew had created. "We adapt." Commander Vextar stared at Jake Morrison with growing confusion. Around them, the cantina looked nothing like a proper battlefield. The strobing lights made everything seem unreal. The blast doors had divided his soldiers into small groups that could not support each other. The emergency sirens were so loud that he had to shout to give orders. This was not how battles were supposed to work. In Zarthak military tradition, enemies faced each other with honor and strength. There were rules about how warriors should fight, but the humans seemed to ignore all the rules. "Turn off these lights," Vextar demanded, pointing at Jake with one clawed finger. "Fight us properly." Jake shook his head. "Why would I do that? The lights are working fine for us." High Ethereal Nixvan tried to use her mental powers to understand what the humans were thinking. But when she reached out with her mind toward Jake, she found something strange. Human thoughts were different from any other species she had encountered. They moved in patterns that made no sense to her. Most species thought in straight lines. They saw a problem and worked toward a solution step by step. But human minds seemed to jump around randomly, considering many different possibilities at the same time. It was like trying to follow a conversation where everyone was talking at once. "Your mental patterns are chaotic," she told Jake, her musical voice filled with frustration. "How do you make decisions when your thoughts are so scattered?" "That's the point," Jake replied. "You can't predict what we'll do next because we don't always know ourselves." Lisa Walsh was still controlling the Cantina's systems from her position near the power controls. She changed the lights again, this time making them pulse in rhythm with the emergency sirens. The combination was designed to make thinking difficult for beings who relied on steady patterns. Pete Collins appeared beside one of the trapped Zarthak soldiers. The soldier raised his plasma rifle, but Pete held up both hands to show he was not armed. "Your weapon is overheating," Pete said calmly, pointing at the rifle. "The power cell indicator is red. If you fire it again, it might explode." The Zarthak soldier looked down at his weapon in surprise. Pete was right. In the confusion of the fight, the soldier had been firing too rapidly. The rifle's cooling system could not keep up. "How did you know that?" the soldier asked. "We've been studying your equipment," Pete answered. "We know how long your weapons can fire before they need to cool down. We know how much ammunition you carry. We know everything about how you fight." This was disturbing news to the Zarthak. Military secrets were supposed to be protected. How had primitive humans learned so much about their weapons and tactics? Amy Rodriguez was having a similar conversation with one of the isolated ethereals. The energy being was trying to charge up for another attack, but every time it gathered power, Amy would fire a shot at something nearby. The noise and vibration would disrupt the ethereal's concentration. "You're stopping me from focusing," the ethereal complained. "That's the idea," Amy replied. "We learned that loud noises and sudden movements make it hard for your people to maintain energy control, so we make lots of noise and move around a lot." The ethereal was shocked. "But that information is classified. Only military researchers know about our sensitivity to disruption." Amy smiled. "Not anymore." Across the cantina, both alien factions were beginning to realize they had walked into a trap. But it was not the kind of trap they understood. The humans had not used superior technology to defeat them. They had not used special powers or advanced weapons. Instead, they had used knowledge. Commander Vextar managed to reach one of his separated soldiers by shouting over the sirens. "Report your status," he commanded. "Sir, the humans seem to know everything about our equipment and tactics," the soldier replied. "They knew my weapon would overheat. They knew exactly where we would take cover. They even knew how we would respond to different types of attacks. This was impossible according to everything Vextar knew about humans. They were supposed to be a young species with limited technology and no real military experience. How could they have learned so much about Zarthak warfare?" High Ethereal Nixvan was having similar thoughts. She tried again to read Jake Morrison's mind, but the human's thoughts were like trying to grab smoke. Every time she thought she understood his intentions, his mental patterns would shift to something completely different. "You're blocking my telepathic abilities somehow," she accused. Jake looked genuinely surprised. "Am I? I didn't know I was doing that. Impossible. Mental blocking requires years of training and discipline." "Maybe human brains just work differently than you expected," Jake suggested. "Maybe your telepathy doesn't work on us because we think in ways you can't understand." This was a terrifying possibility for the ethereals. Their entire society was built on the idea that they were mentally superior to all other species. If humans were naturally resistant to their psychic powers, what did that say about ethereal superiority? Lisa Walsh chose this moment to reveal another surprise. She activated the Cantina's recording system and projected a holographic display. In the center of the room, the display showed footage from security cameras throughout Kepler Station. The footage was not from tonight's fight. It was from the past 6 months, showing Jake Morrison and his crew in various locations around the station. But they were not just trading cargo as everyone had assumed. The recording showed Lisa examining Zarthak weapons in a shop, asking detailed questions about their operation. They showed Pete studying star charts in the station's library, focusing on the border regions between Zarthak and ethereal space. They showed Amy watching military training exercises that both factions conducted in the station's gymnasium. Most disturbing of all, the recording showed Jake having quiet conversations with traders, diplomats, and military personnel from dozens of different species. He was always asking casual questions about politics, military capabilities, and cultural traditions. "You've been spying on us," Commander Vextar said, his voice filled with outrage. "We've been learning about you," Jake corrected. "Everything we recorded was in public places. Everything we asked about was common knowledge to someone. We just asked a lot of people, a lot of questions." The aliens were beginning to understand the scope of what the humans had done. While everyone else saw Jake Morrison and his crew as simple merchants, they had actually been conducting a massive intelligence-gathering operation. But the biggest shock came when Lisa activated another holographic display. This one showed the interior of the Liberty's Edge, the human merchant ship. But instead of cargo holds filled with trade goods, the ship contained sophisticated communication equipment, data analysis computers, and detailed files on every major species in the galaxy. "You're not merchants," High Ethereal Nixfon said, her golden glow dimming with realization. "We are merchants," Jake replied. "But we're also intelligence operatives for the Earth government. We've been preparing for situations exactly like this one." The cantina fell silent except for the emergency sirens. Both alien factions stared at the humans with new understanding. They had been completely outmaneuvered by a species they considered primitive. Pete Collins stepped forward with his tablet, which was still connected to the station systems. "Would you like to know the most interesting part?" he asked. "This entire fight is being broadcast live to communication networks across the galaxy." He activated the tablet's display, showing dozens of news feeds from different worlds. Every major species in the galaxy was watching the confrontation in the Cosmic Drift Cantina. They were all seeing two of the most powerful military forces in space being controlled and manipulated by 4 humans. "The whole galaxy is watching," Pete continued. "They're seeing that the mighty Zarthak hegemony and the superior ethereal collective can't handle one small human crew." Commander Vextar felt his warrior pride crumbling. High Ethereal Nixfon's confidence in her species' mental superiority was shattered. Both leaders realized they had been played by beings they had dismissed as irrelevant. But Jake Morrison was not finished with his revelations. "There's one more thing you should know," he said, his voice carrying across the cantina despite the sirens and flashing lights. "This wasn't an accident. We didn't just happen to be here when your fight started." He paused to let that sink in before delivering the final blow. "We arranged this whole confrontation. We made sure you would both be here tonight. We wanted the galaxy to see what happens when anyone underestimates humanity. The silence that followed was deafening, even with the emergency sirens still wailing in the background. The emergency sirens finally stopped wailing. Lisa Walsh had turned them off from her control station, leaving the cantina in an eerie quiet. The only sounds were the soft hum of damaged equipment and the nervous breathing of the alien combatants. Commander Vextar stood frozen in place, his weapon hanging uselessly at his side. His yellow eyes stared at Jake Morrison with a mixture of rage and something that might have been respect. In 30 years of military service, no enemy had ever made him feel so completely outmaneuvered. High ethereal Nixfon floated closer to the floor, her golden glow dim and flickering. For the first time in centuries, she doubted her own superiority. The humans had not just defeated her in battle. They had proven that her entire understanding of the galaxy was wrong. Jake Morrison looked around the cantina at the watching faces. Zarthak soldiers peered out from behind overturned tables. Ethereals hung in the air like confused stars. The few remaining alien customers huddled in corners, afraid to move, but Jake's attention was focused on something else. The security cameras were still recording. The live broadcast was still sending this moment across the galaxy to billions of watching beings. Everything he said now would be heard by every major government, every military leader, and every ordinary citizen on thousands of worlds. "I want to make something clear," Jake said, his voice carrying easily through the quiet cantina. "Humans didn't come here to conquer anyone. We didn't come here to start wars or destroy your civilizations." He walked slowly toward Commander Vextar, his hands visible and empty of weapons. "We came here to survive. When humanity first made contact with galactic civilization 15 years ago, we learned something important. The galaxy is full of species that are stronger than us, smarter than us, and more advanced than us." Vextar's claws twitched, but he did not raise his weapon. Something in the human's tone kept him listening. "So we had a choice," Jake continued. "We could try to compete with you on your terms, using strength against strength or technology against technology, but we knew we would lose." He turned toward high ethereal Nixfon. "Or we could find a different way. We could use the one advantage that humans have always had." "What advantage?" Nixfon asked, her musical voice barely above a whisper. "We adapt," Jake said simply. "When humans face a problem we can't solve with strength or intelligence, we change the problem itself." Pete Collins stepped forward, still holding his tablet with the galaxy-wide broadcast feeds. "Every species we've met has developed along predictable paths," he explained. "The Zarthak became the greatest warriors in the galaxy. The Ethereals became the most advanced minds. Others became the best engineers, the finest artists, the most skilled diplomats." Amy Rodriguez added, "But humans became the best at becoming whatever we needed to be." Lisa Walsh emerged from the control station, brushing dust off her hands. "When we needed to be warriors, we learned to fight. When we needed to be traders, we learned commerce. When we needed to be spies, we learned espionage." Jake nodded. "Tonight we needed to be teachers. So we arranged a lesson." The aliens in the cantina were beginning to understand. This had not been a random bar fight that got out of control. It had been a carefully planned demonstration, designed to show the galaxy something important about humanity. Commander Vextar found his voice. "You used us," he said, but there was no anger in his words, only a growing understanding of what had happened. "We gave you an opportunity to do what you wanted to do anyway," Jake corrected. "You've been looking for an excuse to fight the Ethereals for years. They've been looking for an excuse to prove their superiority over you. We just made sure it happened when and where we could control the outcome." High ethereal Nixfon's glow brightened as she processed this information. "The trade dispute. You arranged for that Zarthak merchant and ethereal trader to argue. We might have mentioned to each of them that the other was planning to cheat them, Lisa admitted. People hear what they expect to hear. The holographic displays around the cantina were still showing news feeds from across the galaxy. Jake could see that the story was already spreading faster than light through the communication networks. On some worlds, emergency government meetings were being called. On others, military commanders were reviewing their intelligence files on humanity. But the most important audience was right here in the cantina. The representatives of two galactic superpowers were learning that their assumptions about humans had been completely wrong. What do you want from us? Commander Vextar asked. It was the question of a professional soldier seeking to understand his opponent's objectives. Jake smiled. We want what every species wants. We want to survive and grow and explore the galaxy. But we want to do it without having to fight wars with civilizations that could destroy us. He gestured to the damaged cantina around them. Tonight, you've seen what humans can do when we're threatened. We can turn your own strengths against you. We can make your technology work for us instead of against us. We can predict your actions and manipulate your responses. The admission was both a warning and an invitation. Jake was telling the galaxy that humans were not helpless, but he was also offering an alternative to conflict. Amy Rodriguez holstered her weapon completely. But we'd rather be your allies than your enemies. We'd rather trade with you than spy on you. We'd rather learn from you than fight you. Pete Collins showed his tablet to both alien leaders. Look at these broadcast feeds. Right now, representatives from 47 different species are sending messages to their governments. They want to know more about humanity. They want to establish better relations with Earth. High Ethereal Nix Fawn studied the data streams flowing across the tablet screen. You've made yourselves impossible to ignore, she observed. That was the plan, Jake agreed. For 15 years, most of the galaxy has seen humans as primitive newcomers who might be useful as servants or manual laborers. Tonight, that changes. Lisa Walsh began shutting down the emergency system she had activated. The blast doors slowly opened, reuniting the separated groups of aliens. The lights returned to normal levels. The cantina started to look like a bar. Again, instead of a battlefield, but everyone in the room knew that nothing would ever be the same. Commander Vextar walked over to Jake Morrison. The massive reptilian warrior stood directly in front of the human captain, close enough that Jake had to look up to meet his eyes. In my culture, Vextar said slowly, there is great honor in being defeated by a superior opponent. Jake shook his head. We didn't defeat you, Commander. We showed you a different way to think about problems. Perhaps, Vextar replied. But I will not make the mistake of underestimating humans again. High Ethereal Nixfon floated down until she was at eye level with Jake. Your species presents interesting possibilities, she said. We should discuss future cooperation between our peoples. We'd like that, Jake said. But first, I think you two should finish your conversation with each other. He gestured between the Zarthak commander and the ethereal leader. You still have real disagreements about territory and trade routes. Those problems won't solve themselves. Vextar and Nixfon looked at each other with new understanding. Their conflict was still real, but tonight had shown them that there were other players in the galaxy who could not be ignored. Perhaps, Nixfon suggested, we should discuss our differences in a more private setting. Agreed, Vextar said. This bar fight has attracted enough attention for one evening. As the two alien leaders began to arrange a formal meeting, Jake Morrison looked around the cantina one final time. The bartender was already starting to clean up the damage, his skin showing relieved blue colors. The few remaining customers were talking excitedly about what they had witnessed, but Jake's real attention was on the security cameras that were still broadcasting to the galaxy. He walked over to the main camera and looked directly into it. To anyone watching this, he said. Humanity is ready to take its place in galactic civilization. We're not asking for special treatment or demanding recognition. We're simply announcing that we're here, we're capable, and we're not going anywhere. He paused, then added with a slight smile, and if anyone else wants to test us, we'll be happy to arrange another demonstration. Pete Collins walked over to Jake as the broadcast ended. So what happens now? He asked. Jake looked out through the cantina's damaged dome at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was waking up to a new reality. Humanity was no longer the primitive newcomer that could be safely ignored. Now, Jake said, we go back to being merchants. At least until the next time someone needs to learn a lesson about underestimating humans. Amy Rodriguez laughed. I have a feeling that's going to happen sooner than we think. She was right. The age of humanity being overlooked was over. What started as a bar fight had become humanity's graduation ceremony into galactic politics. And the galaxy would never be the same.